10 cavers crawled into the hillside at Mossdale Scar at 2 o'clock on a Saturday afternoon, and 4 of them would spend the rest of their lives explaining why they turned back. It was the 24th of June, 1967. Mossdale Scar sits on the southern slope of Great Whernside, about 4 kilometers northeast of the village of Conistone in Wharfedale. Today it is inside the Yorkshire Dales National Park. From the road it looks like nothing at all. A low band of grey limestone at the head of a shallow valley, rough grass, peat, sheep tracks, and a small stream running down to the foot of the rock. The stream is called Mossdale Beck. It reaches the Scar and then it stops being a stream because the ground swallows it. Everything the Moor collects goes into that hole. Behind the rock there are more than 6 miles of passage, over 10 kilometers of tunnel and crawl and chamber, folded under the fell. And here is the strange part. The water that sinks at Mossdale comes back out of the ground 4 kilometers away, at Black Keld on the River Wharfe. Nobody has ever found the route it takes. Cavers have been trying to link those two ends for the better part of a century, and the connection has never been made. That was the prize in 1967. That was why 10 people were pulling on lamps and boiler suits on a bright Saturday afternoon with the forecast in their heads. The forecast that morning had 5 words in it that nobody weighed properly. Bright periods, chance of thundery showers. Read that on a Saturday, when you have already driven out to the Dales, and it sounds like permission. It was not permission. It had rained over the Conistone area in the days before, and the moor above Mossdale was loaded. Peat that is already wet does not take any more. It sheds. Rain falling on saturated ground does not soak away over hours. It runs, and on Great Whernside, everything that runs ends up in one place, the Beck, and the Beck goes underground. There is a specific cruelty to a cave like Mossdale. It is not a cathedral system with big galleries where a person can climb above a rising stream. Most of Mossdale is flat. Long bedding planes where the roof sits a couple of feet off the floor, and you move on your elbows for hours at a time. In a passage like that, there is no up. The water rises, the ceiling is the limit, and the ceiling is already against your back. The 10 who went in that afternoon knew all of this. They were not tourists. They were experienced cavers, people who had been into Mossdale before and had given years to the far end of it. The plan was to push the extremities. In the language they used themselves, they were going to examine the far reaches of the High Level Mud Caverns, or probe further for a way through the boulder choke at End Cavern. Stream End is where the passage runs out, and the water disappears into a jumble of blocks. Get through that choke, and you are on the way to Black Keld. That is the whole story of Mossdale in one sentence. People crawling for miles to move rocks at the far end of a hole. They went in at about 2 o'clock. The entrance series at Mossdale is not a walk. It is low, wet, awkward work before the system even opens up. Some way in, the group reached a place called Rough Chamber, and there they split. 4 of them turned back. 6 carried on into the far end. There is no drama in that decision as it happened. People turn back in caves all the time. You are cold, or your lamp is poor, or the trip ahead is 9 hours of crawling, and you know your own body. One of the 4 was a young woman named Morag Forbes. She came back out through the entrance series and into the afternoon, and the sky over Wharfedale had changed. It rained that afternoon. Not a shower that passes over in 10 minutes and leaves the grass steaming. It came down on ground that could not take it, and it came down on the whole catchment at once. Mossdale Beck stopped being a stream you could step over. It became a torrent, and a torrent at Mossdale has exactly one place to go, the entrance. Morag Forbes went back to the Scar to wait for the other 6. What she found was that the way in was underwater. Not high, not risky, gone. The whole entrance series drowned, with 6 people on the wrong side of it. There was no radio, no phone in a pocket, nothing on that fell but wind and rain, and a woman standing over a hole that had closed. So she walked. She crossed the fell to Yarnbury, above Conistone, to find a telephone. Think about the arithmetic she was doing with every step. 6 people at the far end of 10 kilometers of passage, with the water rising behind them and no way back through. Every minute she spent on that moor was a minute nobody underground could spare. The call went out, and at 11:10 that night, the alarm reached the Upper Wharfedale Fell Rescue Association. 9 hours after the 10 of them had gone in. And here is the question that sat over everything that followed. How long does air last in a flooded crawl? Cave rescue in 1967 was not a service you called. It was other cavers, men and women who got out of bed, pulled wet gear back on, and drove up the dale in the dark, because the people trapped were people they knew. They reached Mossdale in the small hours of Sunday morning and went straight at the water. 1:15, they found the new entrance, under about 4 feet of water. 4 feet does not sound like much until you understand what it means in a cave that is only 2 feet high. It means the roof is submerged. It means there is no air in there to breathe. They kept working. 2:25, they got as far as Blackpool Sands and found the airspace beyond it completely submerged and impassable. That is the phrase in the record. Completely submerged and impassable. Nobody was getting through that, not with the gear anyone had on that hillside in 1967. So they stopped trying to swim the cave and started trying to move the river. This is the part of Mossdale that people forget. They dammed the Beck. Above the Scar, in the rain, with shovels in their hands, they built a dam to stop the water reaching the hole. Then they began cutting a diversion trench to take the Beck away across the Moor. Planned at some 130 yards long and 6 to 8 feet deep. Fire brigade pumps were brought up, somewhere between 8 and 12 of them. Portable units running all night. Their effect on the water level was described in one word: negligible. In the end, a JCB was driven onto the fell to hold the dam against the pressure of the Beck. A digger on a Yorkshire moor, at night, fighting a stream. That is the measure of what those men were up against. All of it was happening above the heads of 6 people who could not know any of it was happening at all. Slowly through Sunday morning, the water began to drop. By about 8 o'clock, rescuers could pass the flooded sections and get as far as Rough Chamber, the same chamber where the group had split the day before. A strong stream was still running on into the darkness beyond it. That is where hope lived for a few hours on Sunday. Because there are pockets in a cave like that. Chambers with a roof high enough to hold air. The 6 had reached one. If they had sat it out, if the flood pulse had passed over them, then this was a rescue and not a recovery. Search parties went forward into the marathon series, into the long crawls at the far end of the system. The name is not poetry. The far marathon crawls are called that because of how long you spend inside them. At 20 to 6 on Sunday evening, the first search party sent word back. They had found 5 of them. The report gives the place, and the place tells you everything about what happened underground. They were in the crawls, not in a chamber, not gathered somewhere with air above them, but in the low passage, on the route out. They had been coming back. Somewhere in the far reaches of Mossdale, 6 men had heard the sound change. Water where there had been no water. And they had turned and started the long crawl home, and the cave had filled from the entrance inward. 5 were accounted for by Sunday night. The 6th was not. His name was John Ogden. The search went on for 1 man, in 10 kilometers of flooded passage, into Monday, into Tuesday, into Wednesday morning. Think about what that means for the people doing it. They were cavers. They knew him, or knew people who knew him, and they went back down into the thing that had killed him, again and again, in water that could rise with the next shower. At 3:10 on the Wednesday morning, Brian Boardman of the Cave Rescue Organization found John Ogden, 3 in the morning, on the 4th day after a Saturday afternoon trip. That is how the Mossdale search ended, not with a shout but with 1 man alone, in a crawl, finding another. British caving did not recover from Mossdale quickly. It was the worst thing that had happened to the sport in this country, and it happened to people at the center of it. These were not novices who wandered in. They were the ones who had been mapping that system, pushing it, giving up their weekends to it for years. Nobody was prosecuted. There was nobody to prosecute. This is what makes Mossdale different from almost every disaster in this series. There was no bolted door, no overloaded ferry, no inspector who signed a form he had not read, no company that cut a cost and hoped. 6 people made a decision that thousands of cavers had made safely before them, and the weather did the rest. That is a harder thing to sit with than blame. What changed was the way cavers read the sky. After 1967, a forecast that mentions thundery showers over a system that takes the drainage of a whole moor is not a line you skim on the way to the car. Mossdale itself was closed. The entrance no longer belongs to whoever turns up with a lamp. Access is controlled, and for years the practical answer for most cavers was simply that you do not go in. A memorial at the Scar carries the names. Not in a churchyard or on a town square, it is out on the fell, where the wind comes across from Great Whernside, and the only sound is the Beck. And the Beck is still there. Still runs down off the moor. It still reaches the foot of Mossdale Scar, and it still goes into the ground. 4 kilometers away it comes back out at Black Keld into the Wharfe. The way it has for thousands of years. The route it takes in between has never been found. That was what the 6 of them were looking for on the 24th of June, 1967. It is still down there, unmapped, and the water is still the only thing that knows the way. If this one stayed with you, subscribe, and I will take you into the next forgotten disaster in the vault.